He watched the ink dry on a piece of paper that would ruin his bloodline. A single signature. That was all it took to gamble away a 100-year-old empire. Outside, the Texas dust swallowed the horizon. Inside, the sterile smell of a hospital waiting room choked the air. A man stood by a window, gripping a frayed championship medal that wasn't his. 2 lives were hanging by a thread, a girl fighting to breathe in the ICU, and a dynasty about to be erased by sunset. Why do men trade their entire universe for a ghost? Arthur Sterling owned the largest stretch of fertile land in Midland, Texas. But his wealth meant nothing. His true empire was Ironwood Estates, an equestrian sanctuary built from raw dirt by his late wife Claire. When illness took her, it ripped the soul out of him. The sprawling barns became a museum to a dead woman. Jack's only remaining pulse was his daughter Meg. At 22, she inherited her late mother Claire's fierce grace in the saddle. She spent every dawn taming thoroughbreds, trying to keep her mother's dream breathing. Jack watched her from the porch, a bitter man locked in grief. He hired hands to do the heavy lifting. Among them was a drifter named Cole. Quiet, invisible. He shoveled stalls and never looked anyone in the eye. Nobody asked where the young man came from. He demanded minimum wage and a cot in the tack room. But whenever Meg rode, Cole would stop sweeping. His calloused hands would tighten around the broom handle. He observed her posture, the rhythm of her gallop, the tension in the reins. He knew things a common laborer shouldn't know. Meg was the only one who offered him a morning coffee, treating him like a human being. She saw a shadow in his eyes, a profound sorrow she recognized from her own father's face. Yet neither spoke of their ghosts. They just existed in the quiet rhythm of the ranch. Until the devil came to Ironwood. A rival breeder from Dallas, Preston arrived with an offer to buy the land. But Jack refused. But Preston knew exactly which nerve to strike. He didn't insult the horses. He insulted Claire's memory. A smirk crossed the visitor's face as he called the late matriarch a naive amateur. That single sentence shattered Jack's fragile restraint. The grieving widower didn't just throw a punch. He made a fatal, irreversible mistake. Blinded by rage, the old tycoon proposed a wager. A cross-country race against Preston's champion stallion. The stakes were absolute madness. If Jack won, Preston would surrender his entire Dallas operation. But if Jack lost, the deed to Claire's sanctuary belonged to the rival, Preston. It wasn't bravery. It was a suicide mission fueled by mourning. When Meg discovered the contract, terror gripped her chest. The patriarch had wagered her entire past and future on a single afternoon. The race was only 3 weeks away. Jack had a stable of fast animals, but no rider capable of beating a professional syndicate. Understanding the catastrophic reality, the young woman took matters into her own hands. She began pushing herself to the absolute limit. Dawn until dusk, she rode their fastest colt, Midnight. The grueling schedule broke her muscles down. From the shadows of the barn, the drifter watched. Cole saw the desperation in her form. He noticed the slight hesitation before the massive jumps. One evening, as she dismounted, exhausted and trembling, he offered a quiet piece of advice. "You're holding him back," the laborer murmured, not making eye contact. "You anticipate the impact before his hooves leave the ground. Trust the beast." Meg stared at him, bewildered by the technical precision of a mere stable boy. She applied his whispered counsel the very next day. The improvement was undeniable. A fragile alliance formed between the heiress and the outcast. He became her unspoken coach, refining her technique with subtle nods and single phrases. Jack remained isolated in his study, drinking away his anxiety. He knew he had doomed them all. The pressure on his daughter was immense. She was carrying the weight of a dynasty on frail shoulders. Then, exactly 5 days before the fateful showdown, tragedy struck. A sudden thunderstorm spooked the colt midair during a complex hurdle. The animal twisted unnaturally. The impact was deafening. Meg was thrown violently against the wooden barricade. She didn't get up. The stable hand rushed across the mud, sliding to his knees beside her lifeless body. Blood mingled with the wet earth. The ambulance sirens pierced the rural silence, echoing like a funeral march for the ruined estate. The heiress was rushed into surgery, leaving behind a shattered family and a looming deadline. In the sterile hallway, a grim physician approached the trembling patriarch. Meg's spine was fractured. She would walk again, but her racing days were over. The wager was lost by default. Or so Arthur thought, until the clinic doors swung open, revealing a figure covered in mud, holding something impossible. The tycoon collapsed into a plastic waiting room chair. His hubris had cost him his child's safety and his wife's sacred ground. The rival syndicate would seize the property by Monday morning. He buried his face in his hands, weeping openly. Heavy boots echoed on the linoleum floor. It was Cole. The young man stood under the flickering fluorescent lights, dripping rainwater and dirt. "Mr. Preston," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. "I know the deadline." Jack looked up, his sorrow instantly turning to venomous anger. "Get out of here, boy. I have a broken child in intensive care and a lawyer drawing up bankruptcy papers. I don't have time for a farmhand's pity." The patriarch turned away, dismissing the laborer entirely. But the drifter didn't move. He took a step closer to the devastated billionaire. "You don't know me," the young man stated, his tone carrying an unnatural authority. "I saw her fall. I saw her fighting for your name. You are out of options, and you are out of time." Jack became enraged and started calling for security. How dare a minimum wage worker lecture him on his darkest night? "I am going to ride midnight," Cole declared. The sheer audacity of the statement stopped the old man cold. A man who barely spoke, who swept manure for a living, was demanding to race a highly volatile stallion against professionals. "You are a fool," Jack spat. "You have no idea what is at stake." "This isn't a county fair game." Cole's jaw tightened. He reached into his worn denim jacket, his fingers wrapping around a cold, heavy object. For 5 years, he had hidden this piece of metal. It was a relic of a past life he tried to bury in the Texas dirt. A life where crowds chanted his name before a catastrophic collision destroyed his courage. He placed the object on the empty chair beside the tycoon. It was a tarnished gold medallion. The inscription read, "Belmont Stakes Grand Champion." Jack's eyes widened in sheer disbelief as he recognized the face standing before him. "I lost my soul on a track half a decade ago," the former prodigy whispered. "I swore I'd never mount another beast. But your girl reminded me what it feels like to fly." The revelation hung in the cold hospital air. The clock was ticking toward the fatal hour. The father stared at the discarded champion, holding the fate of a dynasty in calloused hands. But there was one brutal condition the boy demanded before getting in the saddle. "I will not ride to salvage your fragile pride, nor to protect your precious acreage," the former champion declared, his gaze piercing through the defeated father. "If I take the reins today, I am riding solely for her survival." The patriarch, stripped of his arrogance, simply nodded in silent gratitude. The morning of the high-stakes showdown arrived enveloped in a dense fog. Preston arrived with an entourage of elite professionals. Smirking at the unknown challenger mounting the ironwood colt, the gunshot cracked through the valley. They surged forward. For the first mile, Preston's prized thoroughbred dominated. Cole rode rigidly, the phantom pain of his past accident freezing his muscles. The trauma was blinding him. As they approached the final, treacherous stretch, the memories of snapping bone threatened to paralyze him. But then, he remembered Meg's bruised face. He recalled the respect she showed a nameless drifter. He leaned into the animal's mane. He stopped anticipating the fall and finally trusted the beast. The stallion responded to the subtle shift in weight. They became a single entity cutting through the wind. In the last 100 yards, they closed the gap. The rival rider whipped his mount desperately, but Cole remained still, moving in perfect harmony with nature. They crossed the marker, winning by a mere fraction of an inch. The silence that followed was absolute, shattered only by Jack falling to his knees in the mud. The estate was secure. The arrogant rival was vanquished. But the victor didn't stay to celebrate the monumental triumph. Hours later, the clinic room door creaked open. Meg slowly opened her eyes to see a bruised, exhausted young man standing at the foot of her bed. He didn't say a word. He gently placed the colossal silver cup on her bedside table. Beside it, he laid down the tarnished gold medallion from his former glory days. Two symbols of conquered fears, sitting quietly in the sterile room. He offered a faint, genuine smile, tipping his weathered hat to the heiress. He walked out into the corridor, not as a broken stable boy hiding from the world, but as a man who had finally reclaimed his spirit. The legacy was safe. Sometimes, the greatest victories aren't won by those trying to protect an empire, but by those with nothing left to lose. We build walls to keep our pain safe, but it takes a single act of selfless courage to tear them down. If this journey resonated with your spirit, subscribe to Legacy and Lies. Hit the like button to support narratives that matter. And prepare yourself. In our next chapter, a sealed envelope discovered in a dead man's vault will force a widow to question her entire marriage. Stay tuned.